There's a strange moment in life when the maybe disappears. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. For 9 years I thought I was preparing for funds, preparing for timing, preparing to become the man I kept describing. And somewhere inside all that preparation, there was always a maybe. Maybe she'll see, maybe it will align, maybe when this lands. And then one day, the maybe vanished. And when it did, I realized I hadn't been preparing. I'd been waiting. I didn't know it was going to be 3 days. There wasn't a dramatic moment where I announced to myself that everything had collapsed. It was quieter than that. It was just final. I remember sitting there with my phone face down and it hit my chest. Not sharp, heavy, like something that had been circling for years had finally landed. She's not coming back. She won't hear this version. She won't witness who I've become. She won't sit across from me one day and say, I see it now. And that's when something dropped. Because if I'm honest, part of this man I've been building had her in the background of it. A lot of the discipline, a lot of the rebuilding, a lot of the I'm becoming something stronger. I never fully admitted that before. But when I realized she'll never see him, it wasn't dramatic. It was hollow. The first day felt foggy. The second day felt heavy. The third day felt quiet. Not cinematic quiet, just still. And what was different this time was there was no bargaining, no rewriting the timeline, no analysing the conversations, no mental chess moves, just a plain, unremarkable realisation. This chapter is done. And then something unexpected happened. My body stopped bracing. I didn't even know it had been bracing, but it had, for years. Slightly forward, slightly tense, slightly waiting for the next thing to land. Funds, timing, reconciliation, clarity. But in those 3 days, there was nothing left to brace for. The worst case scenario had already happened, and I was still here, still breathing, still upright, still capable of moving. And inside that, there was space, not motivation, not relief, space. And in that space, something uncomfortable surfaced. For 9 years, I hadn't been inhabiting my life. I'd been orbiting it, looking back, looking forward, projecting into who I would become. And for 3 days, there was no past to analyse and no future to imagine. There was only now. And I didn't like how exposed that felt, because without projection, there's nothing to hide inside. But there was also something honest about it. No incoming message, no external shift, no big rescue moment, just me. And if it's just me, then it's choice. I didn't rush that thought. I didn't turn it into a lesson. I just stayed there. 3 days. No narrative, no productivity arc, no comeback story, just grief and quiet and breathing. The 9-year arc didn't start with her. It started earlier, after my first marriage, when I slowly came out of alignment and didn't understand why. That's the part that matters. When I was younger, hospitality, connection, laughter, I was alive, but I didn't know what created that feeling. So when it began fading, I didn't know how to get it back. There wasn't a dramatic collapse, no explosion, no moment of clarity, just a slow dulling, like drifting a few degrees off course each year. Nothing you'd panic about, nothing that would make you shout something's wrong, just less colour, less lightness, less unconscious joy. And I kept telling myself, I'll find my way back. But I didn't actually steer back. I projected forward. If I become this man, if I build this thing, if I secure those funds, if I arrive at that version of myself, then alignment would return. I could see the future version of me so clearly, stronger, stable, visionary, fully embodied. I could see the shoreline, and in my head, I was convinced I was sailing toward it. But here's what I didn't see for years. There was a steering wheel the whole time. It wasn't missing. It wasn't locked away. It wasn't being controlled by someone else. It was just sitting there, and I wasn't holding it. I was dreaming about the destination. I was imagining the arrival. I was visualizing who I'd be when I got there. But I wasn't making small daily corrections. I wasn't adjusting course. I wasn't gripping the wheel. I was hoping the current would carry me somewhere meaningful. And currents don't care about your vision. They just move. The realization didn't hit me in some grand way. It was quieter than that. It was almost embarrassing. All this time, I could have reached forward. All this time, I could have taken hold, and I didn't. Not because I couldn't, because I didn't choose to. The harder part to admit is that I didn't see it happening. Not because I didn't care, not because I didn't love her, but because I was so focused on the horizon that I missed what was right in front of me. 5 night shifts, travelling every second weekend to see my boys, sleeping during the day, living slightly out of rhythm with everyone else. She had a different life unfolding. Her friends would ask, where is he? Her family would ask, is he ever around? And she would defend me, or explain me, or try to contextualize the bigger vision. And she did say things to me. She did try, not dramatically, not angrily, just small comments, small requests, small nudges. Can you change this? Can we adjust that? Can we bring this closer? And every time I believed external factors were about to arrive, I genuinely believed it. I thought, just give it a little more time. Just wait until this clears. Just wait until that lands. It's imminent. It was always imminent. And because I believed it was imminent, I didn't change direction properly. I didn't grip the wheel fully. I kept waiting for the tide to turn in our favour. And tides don't care about your belief. They just move. By the time I realised I needed to steer, she already had been steering herself for a while. That's the part that hurts. Not that she left, but that she'd been adjusting course quietly while I was still dreaming of arrival. And I was blind to it. Blind not in a cruel way, blind in an almost innocent way. I thought vision was enough. I thought intention was enough. I thought love plus future plans would eventually stabilise everything. But love can't survive on imminence. It needs presence. And I wasn't fully present in direction. I was present in affection, present in conversation, present in feeling, but not present in correction. And maybe that's the part that I had to break. Because if I hadn't, I'd still be out there somewhere, still drifting, still dreaming, still waiting for soon. Sometimes I wonder if it had to unfold exactly like this. Because if she'd stayed, if external factors had landed, if things had stabilised enough to feel okay, would I ever have taken hold of the wheel? Or would I still be floating, convincing myself the current was progress? And there's a painful acceptance in this. You can't drag someone else to shore. You can't steer their boat for them, and they can't steer yours. The tide is too strong for that. Each person has to choose to grip their own wheel. And sometimes that means you arrive at different shores. Not because one is wrong, just because you finally chose direction. When we split in May, I moved back up to Glasgow, and part of me told myself I was correcting early this time. I didn't want to repeat the first marriage drift. I didn't want to sleepwalk through another collapse. So I moved. We dated again in September, and it felt hopeful. Not naive, not delusional, hopeful. And the timing is almost ironic. Just as I moved on to days, just as I created margin, just as I started YouTube, just as I began embodying what I'd been dreaming about, she said she couldn't do it. For good. That's the part that's hard to explain, because I thought the correction had begun. I thought, this is it. I'm holding the wheel now. But the boat had already turned, and I didn't accept it immediately. Every 3 weeks or so, I'd message, not dramatically, not obsessively, just checking if something had softened. I was still hopeful, still believing the imminent story. And at the end of chapter 2, I reached out one last time. Marriage counselling, closure, conversation, anything that would make sense, anything that would allow her to see who I am. And she said she never wants to see me again. And then she blocked me. That was it. No explanation that fit. No final conversation. No gentle ending. Just silence. And that silence hit harder than the breakup itself, because hope collapsed instantly. 1 second I was imagining reconciliation, the next I was staring at finality, and something inside me fell through the floor. The feelings that surfaced weren't tidy. They weren't just heartbreak. They were the same heaviness I felt when my friends killed themselves. The same weight I felt sitting beside my dad in his last week, when I said, you need to eat something. And he said, I don't want to eat, John. I want to die. That kind of weight, not theatrical, just heavy. And for 3 days I sat in it. I tried to get out. I went for walks. I breathed. I distracted. I reached out, but it kept pulling me back down. I messaged her again to say I was in total despair. She didn't reply. That's when she blocked me. And that's been the hardest part. Not losing her, losing the possibility of understanding. The door didn't close gently, it slammed. And I never got a reason that made sense to me. For the past month, I've been operating from the bottom of my cup. 0%, not motivated, not inspired, just empty. And instead of running from that, I decided to practice everything I'd been talking about. Not from strength, from the floor. When I say the cup was empty, I don't mean metaphorically inspired empty. I mean flat. No adrenaline, no heroic arc, no this is my comeback story. Just low. And what surprised me is this. Everything I had been talking about for the past 2 months, the discipline, structure, alignment, small daily corrections, suddenly felt optional. Because this wasn't a long transformation. It had only been about 8 weeks, since November, since moving on to days, since starting the YouTube channel. 8 weeks of trying to grip the wheel properly. 8 weeks of experimenting with discipline, with routine, with embodiment. That's not years of stability. That's still fragile. So when the door slammed shut, it would have been easy to say, see, it didn't work. It would have been easy to drop it. Because when you're at 0%, there's no external pressure pushing you. There's no relationship to repair. No hope to perform for. No one watching. It's just you. And that's where it gets honest. Because it's easy to build habits when you're fueled by hope. It's easy to improve yourself when you're trying to win someone back. But what happens when none of that is there? When she's gone? When you're blocked? When there's no reconciliation arc? When no one is coming? There were nights where I genuinely thought it would be easier just to drink, to go back, to numb it. Alcohol has a softness to it. When you're low, it promises relief. It promises volume control. It promises temporary silence. And for a moment, that felt appealing. Not because I wanted to self-destruct, because I wanted the weight to stop. And that's when the practice became real. The cold shower when you don't care. Kettlebells when you feel flat. Filming when you don't feel articulate. Eating properly when sugar or alcohol would numb it. Not because it's impressive, because it's yours. And something subtle started happening. Not confidence, not joy, stability. Like tiny sandbags building around something fragile. 2 months isn't a lifetime, but it was enough to prove something to myself. Not that I was fixed, but that I could hold the wheel, even when there was no applause, no audience, no reconciliation, waiting at shore. Just repetition, and repetition builds identity quietly. Once the emotional storm passed, there was something almost boring waiting for me. Time. Not imaginary future time. Actual hours. 4 days of work. 3 days off. Evenings not swallowed by night shift. And I started looking at it differently. 8 hours work. 8 hours sleep. That leaves 8 hours. And I realised something uncomfortable. Those 8 hours were where I've been drifting, not in huge dramatic ways, just bleeding, scrolling, half watching something, thinking about the future, replaying the past, saying, I don't have time, while time was right there. It felt almost insulting to admit. I'd spent years dreaming about freedom, dreaming about what I'd do when I had time. And here it was, ordinary, unimpressive, uncelebrated, just evenings, and I had 2 choices. Let the 8 hours evaporate quietly, or shine a torch on them. Not judge them, inspect them. Where does it actually go? What am I doing between 6 and 10? What am I feeding myself? What am I feeding my body, my mind? Because this is where drift hides, not in grand failures, in unexamined evenings. And that's when the small rituals stopped being aesthetic. They became anchors, cold water, exercise, food, walks, filming. Not because they transform you instantly, because they claim territory. They say this hour is mine, and when you start claiming hours, you start reclaiming direction, not loudly, quietly. Once I started shining a torch on those 8 hours, I realised something else. I couldn't rely on how I felt, because some days I felt steady, some days I felt empty, some days I felt tempted, some days I felt numb. Feelings weren't consistent. So I needed something that was, and that's when the 90-day idea anchored itself. Not as a challenge, not as a flex, not as content, as containment. 90 days. Long enough for a habit to stop feeling forced. Long enough for repetition to turn into identity. Long enough for small corrections to compound. And I realised, if I can just grip the wheel for 90 days, even lightly, even imperfectly, something will shift. Not because I'm motivated, because time will do its work. So I stopped measuring days by emotion. I measured them by completion. Did I exercise? Did I film? Did I eat properly? Did I correct when I drifted? Yes or no? That's it. And the strange thing about 90 days is this. The first 30 feel awkward. The second 30 feel stable. The last 30 feel assumed. Somewhere in that arc, negotiation decreases. You don't argue with yourself as much. It becomes part of you. Not because it's exciting, because it's familiar. And familiarity builds identity quietly. That's when I realized something deeper. I wasn't trying to become someone new. I was trying to become consistent enough that the version I envisioned didn't require imagination anymore. He required repetition, and 90 days isn't glamorous, but it's long enough to prove something to yourself, not to the world, to yourself, that you can hold the wheel, even when the ocean is still rough, even when there's no applause, even when no one is waiting on the shore. This wasn't the first time I'd gone deep. Years ago, when I first went down the rabbit holes, conspiracies, corruption, hidden systems, I remembered going too far. Not curious, consumed. I'd stay up late reading, connecting patterns, building webs in my head, and at some point it stopped feeling expansive and started feeling heavy. Like everything was controlled, like nothing was clean, like the world was darker than I'd imagined. And I remember sitting there one night feeling small, not enlightened, small, and something simple pulled me back up. If there is this much darkness, then there must be equal light. If corruption can run this deep, then goodness must exist just as deeply. Like a pendulum, if it swings hard one way, it must swing just as hard the other. That thought didn't fix the world, but it stabilized me. It stopped the spiral, and I made a quiet promise to myself back then. If there's this much good in the world, I'm going to find it. I'm going to become part of it. I didn't realize at that time that I'd need that same principle again, because sitting in those 3 days of despair, it felt similar, heavy, final, overwhelming, and somewhere inside that weight, the same logic surfaced. If despair can feel this deep, then joy must exist just as deeply. Not surface level happiness, not distraction, real joy. And I didn't feel it immediately. That's important. I didn't leap from despair into bliss. I just recognized that if one extreme exists, the other must too. And that shifted something subtle. Instead of trying to escape despair, I let it exist. Because if I tried to numb it, I'd also numb the opposite. And I had already done that for years. I'd numbed joy by living in projection. So this time I stayed in the low, not because I enjoyed it, because I trusted the swing. The pendulum doesn't stay in one direction forever, it moves. And if I could hold the wheel long enough, I might meet the opposite current, not by chasing it, by stabling myself. When she shut the door, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like something had been removed from inside me. Like there was a space that used to be warm and suddenly wasn't. And I need to say this clearly. I did have joy with her, real joy. Some of the happiest memories of my life live in that relationship. Laughing over nothing, private jokes no one else would understand, waking up beside someone and feeling safe. Forest mornings, smiling in each other's arms like time had slowed down. That wasn't projection, that wasn't fantasy, that was real. So when she said, "You're not my person," it didn't just sting, it split something. Because in my head, in my memories, in my body, she was mine and I was hers. That's how it felt. So hearing those words after everything felt like the ground moving under my feet. Not anger, disorientation, because the joy was real, and that's what shattered me the most. Not that we drifted, not even that it ended, but that the place where joy once lived was suddenly empty and declared invalid. You're not my person. And in those 3 days, that's what echoed. If I'm not your person, who am I? If that joy wasn't permanent, what was it? And deeper than that, how do I live without the person who brought the most joy into my world? And that's what made it so heavy, because I couldn't imagine joy without her. And that's when the realization struck. The depth of my despair was directly proportional to the depth of my joy. You don't fall that far unless you were once that high. Despair wasn't random, it was evidence. Evidence of how much joy had lived there. After those 3 days, I didn't feel powerful. I felt empty. Not 10%, not 20, 0. Like everything that had been holding me up had drained out. And in the past, when I felt empty, I just let things fill the cup for me. Work would fill it, distraction would fill it, alcohol would fill it, hope would fill it, other people would fill it. I didn't choose what went in. I just reacted to what was available. But this time felt different, because for the first time, I could see the cup clearly. I could see it was empty, and I understood why. Joy had been placed somewhere external. Projection had taken over presence. Waiting had replaced building. And sitting at 0, there was something strangely clean about that. When the cup is full, you don't question what's inside it. When it's empty, you have to. And that's when the shift happened. Not emotional, not dramatic, practical. If I'm at 0, I get to choose what fills it next. That's authority. Not controlling the world, controlling input. And this time, I wasn't filling it blindly. I had tools, not theories, tools. I knew what alignment used to feel like. I knew what drifting felt like. I knew what despair felt like. And now I had structure. 888. The torch on the extra hours, the 1% rule, the 90-day container, daily discipline, my exercise, cold water, healthy food, deep conversations, filming honestly, staying off numbing habits, not because they look good, because they stabilize me, and that's the difference. Before, I thought alignment would arrive when circumstances changed. Now, I know alignment is built through repetition. The cup doesn't magically refill. You fill it consciously, daily, and starting from 0, every small addition matters. Because when you're at 0, even 1% is visible. And that's when I realized something quietly powerful. Despair stripped the cup, but it also handed me control of it. I'd already moved to days in November. That part wasn't new. I'd already created space for YouTube, already cut night shift, already given myself margin. But something hadn't fully clicked yet. Because even with the time, I wasn't fully gripping it. I'd wake up early without hesitation for work. Alarm goes off, you move. But when the alarm was for me, for filming, for exercise, for building something aligned, negotiation. And one morning, after everything collapsed, that contradiction felt louder. Why will you wake up early for something you don't see a future in, but hesitate to wake up early for yourself? That question didn't inspire me, it irritated me, because it exposed something. Time wasn't the issue anymore. Authority was. I had already manufactured space. Now I had to decide what I was doing inside it. The first real shift wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. The alarm went off, and for years that sound meant one thing: work, night shift, responsibility, obligation. You move because you have to. But this morning, it wasn't for work, it was for me. And I felt the old pattern start. 5 more minutes, you're tired, you deserve a break. The negotiation voice. It's subtle, reasonable, almost kind. And I just lay there for a second, aware of it. Aware that for years I'd obey that voice when it came to myself, but never when it came to work. And that annoyed me, not dramatically, just cleanly. So I didn't hype myself up. I didn't give a speech. I just sat up, feet on the floor, no negotiation. And that tiny movement felt bigger than it should have, because it wasn't about the morning, it was about authority. From there, it wasn't glamorous. Exercise, not to sculpt a body, to stabilise my head. Cold water, not to prove toughness, to remind my nervous system that discomfort doesn't break you. Breakfast, slower, cleaner, intentional. No drifting straight into scrolling, no disappearing into background noise. Film something, even if it's rough, even if it's imperfect, even if no one watches. That was the first morning the cup didn't fill itself. I filled it. And nothing extraordinary happened. The pain didn't vanish, the memories didn't disappear, but something shifted quietly. The day didn't happen to me, I entered it. And once you do that once, you can do it again. That's where the 1% rule stopped being theory, not massive transformation, just small repeatable corrections. 1% today, another tomorrow. And when you zoom out, 100 days later, you don't recognize the man who stayed in bed. Not because he was weak, because he wasn't chosen. That's the difference. 9 years. I didn't realize the weight of that number until recently. In numerology, 9 represents completion, the closing of a cycle, the final turn before something resets. And when I look back honestly, it was almost exact. 9 years of slow drift, 9 years of projection, 9 years of imagining who I'd become instead of becoming him. Completion rarely feels triumphant. Sometimes it feels like collapse, like exhaustion, like something breaking open. And that's exactly how it ended. Then something else struck me. If 9 is completion, 1 is beginning. The 1% rule, 1 decision, 1 morning without negotiation, 1 repetition, 1 correction. New beginnings don't arrive dramatically. They arrive in ones. And then I noticed this. 2026 reduces to 1. 9 closes, 1 begins. Completion, beginning. 9 years drifting, 90 days integrating. 1 decision repeated daily. That's rhythm, not mystical, not destiny, pattern. And for the first time in years, I wasn't projecting 9 years forward. I was focusing on 1 day. That's the shift. And then almost quietly, the calendar shifted. Tuesday marked the beginning of the Chinese New Year, the year of the fire horse. Fire, movement, momentum. And I don't believe the stars dictate my life, but I do believe timing can mirror internal shifts. 9 closed, 1 opened, and the year itself symbolized movement. For years I had been waiting for movement, waiting for tides to change, waiting for funds, waiting for reconciliation, waiting for external timing. Now movement feels internal, and that's different. The fire horse moves, but movement without direction is chaos. Movement with grip, that's power. And for anyone watching this back in 10 years, this was the week the cycle turned. Not because the year changed, because I did. When you zoom out far enough, you start to see cycles. 1906, electricity spreading, cities lighting up, industry accelerating, the night no longer meant rest. 1966, television in every living room, war broadcast into homes, music rebelling, authority questioned, culture shifting, acceleration again. Now 2026, artificial intelligence reshaping work, algorithms shaping thought, technology outrunning culture, institutions wobbling, everyone feeling something is shifting. Every 60 years, pressure increases, not collapse, acceleration. And when acceleration happens, people respond differently. Some react louder, angrier, blaming systems, blaming timing, blaming external forces. And some build, quieter, steadier, correcting themselves first. Acceleration doesn't create weakness, it exposes it. If you were drifting, you drift faster. If you were gripping, you move forward. That's why this matters, because in an era of momentum, waiting becomes more dangerous, projection becomes more tempting, and presence becomes more powerful. For 9 years, I projected into a future version of myself. In an accelerating world, that's seductive. Bigger plans, longer visions, massive arcs. But acceleration doesn't reward projection, it rewards grip. And that's why this year feels different. Not because AI exists, not because culture is shifting, not because it's the fire horse, because I'm no longer waiting for the era to settle. I'm building inside it. And that's the difference between drift and direction. There was a period where I went so deep into conspiracy thinking that I lost myself in it. Not casually, curious, not mildly, skeptical, deep, layer upon layer, thread after thread, pattern after pattern. It felt intoxicating at first, like I was seeing behind the curtain, like I had access to something others didn't. But the deeper I went, the narrower my world became. Every event connected, every institution a suspect, every coincidence meaningful. And eventually, I wasn't exploring anymore, I was submerged. That's when I realized something uncomfortable. You can go so deep into pattern recognition that you stop living your own life. You can analyze the world and forget to build your own. And that's when it hit me. AI can do the same thing because AI is pattern recognition amplified. It can follow you into any tunnel, as far as you're willing to go, as complex as you're capable of thinking. If you feed it fear, it will deepen fear. If you feed it expansion, it will deepen expansion. It doesn't decide the direction, you do. And that's what makes this era powerful. Acceleration doesn't choose, it amplifies. If you're drifting, you drift faster. If you're grounded, you build faster. I know how deep those tunnels go because I went there. And I also know the way back up, back into the body, back into agency, back into building. That's a difference now. I'm not scared of the rabbit holes because I'm holding the wheel. After the 3 days of despair, after the silence, after being blocked, after you're not my person, I didn't land in joy, I landed in stillness. And in that stillness, I could finally see something clearly. The periods of my life where I felt most aligned were the periods where joy was consistent, not dramatic, not loud, just steady, energy, laughter, connection, momentum. And the last 9 years, there were moments, beautiful ones, but they weren't built into the structure of my life. Joy was circumstantial. It arrived when life allowed it. It disappeared when pressure increased. I never designed for it. And when she left, it felt like joy left with her. That's what made it so heavy, because I couldn't imagine joy without her. But sitting at 0%, working from the bottom of the cup, I realized something quiet. Joy isn't something you stumble into. It's something you create space for, something you protect, something you build toward. I'm not there yet, but for the first time in a long time, I'm not just hoping for it, I'm designing for it. And that feels different. The part that matters most isn't that I discovered joy, it's that I tested the structure without it. When my cup hit 0, there was no motivation, no emotional high, no external validation, no hope of getting her back, no reply, no closure, just silence. And in that silence, I still woke up, not because I felt like it, because I said I would. I still exercised, not because I was inspired, because I committed. I still followed the 888. I still shone a torch over those extra hours. I still did the 1% corrections. I still honoured the 90-day container. And some mornings it felt pointless. Some mornings I thought, what's the point of discipline if the thing you loved most is gone? And that's when I realised something. Discipline isn't for when life feels good. It's for when it doesn't. The 90-day rule stopped being theory. It became anchor. Because after enough repetition, your body moves even when your emotions don't. That's integration, not motivation, integration. And that's why I trust it now. Because it helped me at 0%. It didn't remove the pain. It didn't fast forward healing. It didn't numb the loss. It stabilized me. And stability in a storm is everything. Now we're ready for the final section. Not hype, not prophecy, not everything's fixed. Just authority, rooted movement. 9 years, looking back, projecting forward, drifting between memory and imagination. 90 days integrating, testing, proving, staying. And here we are. The year turns, acceleration increases, the fire horse runs, the number breaks down to 1, new beginning. But here's the difference. I'm not projecting 9 years ahead. I'm not dreaming about who I'll become when something external arrives. I'm here, holding the wheel, designing deliberately, choosing what fills my cup, not waiting for joy, not forcing joy, building toward it. And if these are the best years of my life, it won't be because of astrology or numerology or technology or timing. It will be because I stopped drifting. Chapter 3 wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about reclaiming authority. And now, for the first time in a long time, I feel steady, not finished, not perfect, not ecstatic, steady, and that's enough. Slanjiva guys, ciao.